All right, chapter 4. So now, once Nick has gotten a taste of one of Gatsby's parties, he goes every weekend. And then he tells us while he goes, he keeps kind of a log of all the people that show up at his party. Now, there's a very big discrepancy between the East Egg old money people and the West Egg new money people. So you'll notice with East Egg, it's big names and their families. And it even says with their noses, or flipped up their noses like goats at whoever came near. So most of the East Egg people are pretty stuck up and pretentious. Now, we have West Egg, and most of the West Egg people are film stars, producers, Hollywood people. They have a lot of drama in their life, like someone who strangled his wife. So that is West Egg, and that's kind of just the discrepancy between East Egg and West Egg. However, when they all go to Gatsby's party, they all pretty much act the same, which is a little wild and a little crazy. Now, other than that, one morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, Gatsby shows up at Nick's house just randomly. So imagine someone just shows up at your house at 9 in the morning and says, "You're going to lunch with me." And Nick goes. So Gatsby just kind of randomly shows up, and he decides that they're going to go to lunch together. Now, Gatsby's acting a little nervous. It says this quality was continually breaking through his punctilious manner in the shape of restlessness. He was never quite still. There was always a tapping foot somewhere or the impatient opening and closing of a hand. So this tells us that Gatsby seems to be nervous about something. We're not really sure what, but he seems a little off. And we also have to wonder, why the heck does Nick have to go to lunch with him in New York City all of a sudden? So, the drive over there is a little weird. One, Gatsby is very restless and has a lot of nervous energy. And then he's going to tell Nick a lot of stories that are going to seem unbelievable. So he starts with saying that he is the son of some wealthy people in the Middle West, and they are all dead now. Very convenient. And then they left him a great deal of money, and he went to Oxford. Nick even notices he hurried the freight educated at Oxford like it bothered him. Now, Nick kind of catches him here. He asks him what part of the Middle West, and Gatsby says San Francisco. San Francisco is not the Middle West. It is far west. So just note that little discrepancy there. He does continue to say that his family left him a good deal of money, and then he goes on to this even more elaborate story about living like a young Raja with jewels and rubies and collecting things and hunting big game. And now Nick is thinking, this is ridiculous. This is so over the top. There is no way that it is true. He then goes on to say how he fought in the war and he got a medal that he keeps on him all the time. So in case Nick was like, "Nah, I don't believe that you fought in the war," he's got a medal just randomly on him at all times. Once again, that's very weird. And then he also pulls out something he always carries with him, a picture taken at Oxford, so that people can't say that he didn't go to Oxford. Again, very weird that he would just carry this around with him all the time. And now Nick is thinking, well, maybe it is true. Maybe this is something that actually happened, and it just seems like it's not true. Gatsby then goes on to say that he's going to make a big request of Nick today, and we should be questioning what? What does he want? Why do we have to go to New York for this? Why this big show to make a request of a neighbor? And then he goes on to tell Nick that he is going to tea with Jordan Baker this afternoon, and Jordan Baker is going to be the one to tell Nick what Gatsby wants, not Gatsby himself. So now this is even more complicated. So we go on. He does get pulled over, or a policeman attempts to pull him over, and he flashes the picture of Oxford and they let him go. Now, Nick's still questioning all this about Gatsby. until they go over the Queensboro Bridge into New York City. And when they go over the bridge, they see a limousine driven by a white chauffeur in which sat 3 modish Negroes, 2 bucks, and a girl. Now, we have to remember this is 1920s. We still have segregation. We still have Jim Crow. So for this to happen in New York City where there's a white chauffeur, that is unheard of in other parts of the country. So Nick then decides that anything can happen in New York City, even Gatsby's stories. So now he's bought into it. Now, when they go to lunch, they are in a speakeasy, and they run into Mr. Wolfsheim, who is Gatsby's partner. Now, Wolfsheim's a bit shady. When he first introduces himself, he's still talking to someone, and he says, I handed money to Gatsby, and I said, all right, Gatsby, don't pay him a penny till he shuts his mouth. He shut it then and there. So this makes us question what Wolfsheim's business dealings are, if we're giving people money to shut their mouths. Then we have a little bit of a conversation. Then Wolfsheim tells a story about one of his gangster buddies being shot. And then Wolfsheim slips up and asks Nick, I understand you're looking for a business connection. And he has the wrong person, and Gatsby quickly stops him. Okay, and then Gatsby kind of wanders away, and he and Wolfsheim have a conversation. Also, some irony. Gatsby says, Miss Baker's a great sportswoman, you know. She'd never do anything that wasn't all right. We know that she cheated at a golf tournament, so we know that this is not true. All right, so Wolfsheim and Nick are kind of having a little conversation. It seems set up. He's talking about Gatsby, and then he cuts in and says, I see you're looking at my cuff buttons or cufflinks. And Nick's not really looking at him, but now he is, and they look like ivory. And he says, finest specimens of human molars. His cufflinks are made of human teeth. So if you weren't sure about Wolfsheim, you should for sure know he's no good. And then Wolfsheim cuts in and says Gatsby's very careful about women. He would never so much as look at a friend's wife, which is a very weird statement, but it should also bring us back to Daisy, who is married. Okay, so we continue on. Gatsby comes back, Wolfsheim leaves. Nick asks Gatsby if Wolfsheim's a dentist, which Gatsby responds, no, he's a gambler, and also lets him know that he fixed the 1919 World Series, which is very illegal. Then up comes Tom Buchanan, Daisy's husband, and they kind of share some greetings, and then all of a sudden, Gatsby is just gone. And we have to wonder, why has he just disappeared? Well, remember, he used to have a relationship with Daisy, so seeing Tom, her husband, might weird him out a little bit. All right. So then we are cutting away from lunch, and it is now later in the evening, and we are at, we're with Jordan Baker, and she is telling the story of Daisy and Gatsby. And she begins with how Daisy was so infatuated with Gatsby. He was a soldier. He's dressed like a soldier, that one day when Jordan came up, she didn't even notice that Jordan was there until she was 5 feet away. Okay? Then Gatsby has to go off to war, and Daisy is upset. She wants to tell him goodbye. She can't. He's poor. He's not in the same class as her. So after Gatsby goes off to war, she marries Tom Buchanan, and they have this very big fancy wedding. The day before the wedding, Daisy wants to change her mind about marrying Tom. She gets very drunk. She wants to throw away her pearl necklace that Tom gave her, and she is holding on to a letter. who we should assume probably came from Gatsby as he's away at war. And she doesn't want to go through with the wedding. People convince her to go through with the wedding. And seemingly she has forgotten about Gatsby. So they have the wedding, and it seems like they're in love. Jordan Baker says they've never seen a better couple. Until Tom has a wreck, and the wreck makes the front page of the papers, and with him in a car is one of the maids at the hotel who has broken her arm. So this is the first instance where Tom is cheating, and then it kind of follows apart from there. Now, since then, Daisy's never heard of Gatsby before, or since then. She hasn't heard the name Gatsby until Jordan Baker said it at their house at dinner, and then Daisy becomes quite curious. Now, Nick, with his naive self, says it's a strange coincidence that Gatsby would happen to have a house across the bay from Daisy. Like, literally, if you go out of Gatsby's house and look across the bay, you see Daisy's house. And Jordan Baker says it's not a coincidence at all. Gatsby bought that house so that Daisy would be just across the bay. And we have to remember, the first night that Nick saw Gatsby, he was reaching out across the bay and kind of trembling. He's reaching towards Daisy's house. Now, Gatsby is trying so hard to live up to Daisy's expectation of a rich, lavish lifestyle. Now, here's his request. He wants to know if Nick will invite Daisy to tea at Nick's house and then let Gatsby come over. Daisy is not to know that Gatsby is coming over. So he's trying to set her up, basically. He wants Nick to invite Daisy to tea. Daisy will come to Nick's house for tea, and then Gatsby will just pop by. And he has to do it this way because he wants her to see his house. So he wants to impress her with this house. And Jordan Baker even says, I think he half expected her to wander into one of his parties some night, but she never did. So now we know what his parties were for. His parties were so that hopefully Daisy or someone who knew her would come into his party so that they could reconnect. Now, remember, Wolfsheim said Gatsby would never look at someone's wife. But now he is trying to set up an out-of-the-blue date with Daisy, who is Tom's wife. Okay, so we keep going. Nick agrees to it. Jordan says she's not to know that Gatsby's coming over. And we pretty much end there. It hints at Jordan and Nick's kind of little summer fling. It's nothing serious. Nick really doesn't even respect Jordan, but they just kind of have like a little thing going on, like they're talking. So that is chapter 4. Chapter 5, we will get to see if the meeting goes down as planned. Is Daisy going to be excited to see Gatsby? Is she not? We will find that out in chapter 5.